All right, welcome back to the deep dive. We're diving headfirst into something I think a lot of you have been asking about, and that's commercial management in construction.
Yeah, it's a pretty dense subject, but we're going to try and break it down for you.
Absolutely. You're here because you want to, really get a good understanding of this stuff, but you don't have all day, right?
Right.
So we're going to try to get you up to speed as efficiently as possible. And we're using the RICS practice information document on the commercial management of construction. That's our source material for this deep dive.
Yep, that's the one.
And, just to level set here, commercial management in construction, it's really all about like the money side of things, right?
It is. It's the financial engine of the project, making sure that it's not just built, but it's built profitably, that you're monitoring all your processes internally, you're managing the relationships you have externally with your subcontractors and your suppliers, that you're keeping a very close eye on the financial performance and the risks associated with that.
Yeah, it's a lot more than just handing out checks.
Oh, absolutely. It's very technical, and it draws on, your quantity surveying skills quite a bit.
Right. Okay, so the document we're using, the RICS practice information, it's called Commercial Management of Construction. First edition, March 2016.
Okay.
And gotta mention, this is specific to the UK.
Right.
And it's what the RICS calls practice information, meaning it's like, guidance, good practice for RICS members, not really strict regulations.
Yeah, more like best practices, not necessarily hard and fast rules.
Okay. So our mission in this deep dive, we're going to try to pull out the key takeaways, the practical things you need to know about commercial management.
Exactly. We're going to be hitting the really practical points.
We'll be talking about things like estimating, value engineering, supply chain management, all that good stuff.
Yeah. How to value the work that's being done, understanding your costs, cost and value analysis, the cash flow side of things, and making commercial decisions.
Right, because at the end of the day, we want to know how to make money.
That's the goal, isn't it?
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Where does it all begin? Estimates.
Yeah.
You got to know how much this thing is going to cost, right?
Right. Estimates and budgets are the bedrock. They're what everything else is built upon. At the very beginning, when you're just appraising the project, you might have a high-level estimate.
Right, just to get a ballpark figure.
Exactly, just to see if it's even viable. But as the project develops and the design gets more defined, you need much more detailed estimates, especially when you're ready to go out to tender.
Okay, so this detailed estimate, it's not just one number, right? It's broken down.
Yeah, it's a process.
Yeah.
Typically, there are two main stages. First, you produce the bill of quantities. This is where you measure every single piece of the project. It's very meticulous. It's got to be accurate because any errors here will, snowball later on.
Yeah, you're building the entire project on paper, essentially.
That's a good way to put it. We move on to stage 2, which is pricing.
Okay, so you figured out what you need. Now you got to figure out how much it'll cost.
Precisely. Each item in the BOQ queue gets assigned a rate or a price. And this is where you consider your labor costs, your plant and equipment, materials, and any subcontractors you might need. And you need to be really clear at this point about what each subcontractor is responsible for and how they'll be pricing their work.
Yeah, that makes sense. Avoid any nasty surprises down the line. So when you're looking at a detailed estimate, what are the main components you're going to see?
Well, you'll have your materials, your labor, plant and equipment, site overheads, things like temporary site buildings, utilities, security, and then you'll have your profit margin.
Right. Got to make some money after all.
Exactly. And estimators often use historical cost data to help them with these figures. Things like BCIS, the Building Cost Information Service, they have a ton of data on past projects that can be really useful.
Okay, so that detailed estimate, it's not just for winning the contract, right? It lives on.
Oh, absolutely. Once construction starts, that estimate becomes essential. It's used to set the contract price, monitor progress, manage the budget, and even project the cash flow. It really underpins a lot of what happens on the project.
So it's like the financial roadmap for the whole project.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
Okay. Now, the RICS document talks about different formats for these detailed estimates, like elemental, trade-based, operational, all these different approaches.
Yeah, they're all slightly different ways of breaking down the work.
That sounds confusing.
It can be, but the key is that regardless of the format, the information needs to be organized and analyzed using common analysis levels.
Common analysis levels?
Yeah. Basically, these are consistent categories for different activities or elements of work, It's like using the same language for everything. So whether you're looking at the estimate, the actual costs, the value of work completed, or the overall performance, you're using the same categories.
Right, so you're comparing apples to apples.
Exactly. It makes analysis so much easier. And it helps you spot any discrepancies or potential problems early on.
That's smart. Now, the document also mentions how technology has changed estimating.
Oh, yeah. Huge changes. We've gone from doing everything by hand to spreadsheets to specialized software.
Spreadsheets, those were the days, right?
Well, they have their place. They're flexible, but they can also be a bit messy and prone to errors. Specialized software offers much better control, reduces errors, and makes collaboration easier. And now we're even seeing integration with BIM, building information modeling.
BIM, yeah, that's the future, isn't it?
It's becoming more and more common. With BIM, you can essentially generate quantities directly from the 3D model. That's a huge time saver, and it also improves accuracy.
Okay, so we've got our detailed estimate. Technology is helping us make it more efficient and accurate. What happens next?
So once you've won the contract, that detailed estimate becomes your project budget,
The budget, right.
sometimes called the site budget or the budget to build. It's the working financial plan for the actual construction phase.
Okay, so it's the estimate, but refined for the actual build.
Yeah, there might be some differences in how it's presented, Maybe it'll be net of overhead and profit. Maybe any adjustments made by company directors will be shown separately. The categorization might change, too, to reflect the subcontractor packages.
Right, so it becomes more tailored to how you're actually going to build the project.
Exactly. It's all about making it a useful tool for managing the project's finances.
Okay, so estimates, budgets, we've got the foundation laid. What about value engineering? What is that all about?
Value engineering is a way to get the most bang for your buck out of the project. But it's not just about finding the cheapest option. It's about finding the optimal balance between function, quality, cost, risk, and even the whole life cost of the building.
So it's not just cutting corners.
No, not at all. It's about being smart and finding creative solutions that deliver the best overall value. And your estimate and budget are essential here because they give you the baseline to compare different options against.
Makes sense. You need a starting point.
Absolutely. And the RICS guidance says that the best time to do value engineering is between the initial concept and the detailed design phase.
Why that stage specifically?
Because that's when you have the most flexibility to make changes without causing delays or blowing the budget. The further along you get, the more expensive and difficult it becomes to change things.
Yeah, once things are set in stone, it's hard to go back.
Right. And it's really important to take a holistic view with value engineering. Don't just focus on the upfront cost. Consider the long-term implications. A cheaper material might save you money now, but if it needs more maintenance down the line, you might end up spending more in the long run.
Right, so think about the whole life cycle.
Exactly. The RICS document gives the example of choosing between precast concrete and in situ concrete.
Okay, good example.
Precast might be higher quality, but you've got to think about the joints, the logistics, how it affects the program. In situ might be better for complex designs, while precast is good for repetitive elements.
So it depends on the project.
Always depends on the project. There's no one-size-fits-all solution.
What about other examples of value engineering? What else might you look at?
Oh, there are loads of examples. You might consider different window and door materials, steel versus concrete frames, using off-site bathroom pods, even things like the type of finish you use in a bathroom.
So it can be big things or small things?
Exactly. Every decision can have an impact on the overall value. The document specifically mentions changing from a steel frame to a concrete frame. That's a big change, right?
Yeah, that's a major design change.
And it would have major commercial implications. You'd have to look at the direct cost difference, the impact on the schedule, the design implications, the long-term performance. It's a whole lot to consider.
So value engineering, it's not just the contractor's job, is it?
Right. It can be contractor-led or employer-designer-led.
So the contractor might suggest things, but the client or the designer can too.
Exactly. And communication is key here. The contractor needs to formally communicate any suggestions, and the employer-designer needs to issue formal instructions for any agreed changes.
And what about the commercial manager? What's their role in all this?
The commercial manager is like the conductor of the value engineering orchestra. They provide structure, governance, they track the proposals, make sure any savings are reflected in the budget. They're essential for making sure the process is managed effectively.
Okay, we've covered estimates, we've talked about value engineering. Now let's move on to another big one, supply chain management. This is all about managing your subcontractors and suppliers, right?
Yeah, that's right. They're the backbone of the project, so you got to make sure you're managing them effectively.
The RICS breaks it down into 4 stages: vendor management, procurement and pre-contract, contract administration, and final account. Let's start with vendor management. What's that about?
Vendor management is about keeping track of all the companies you work with. Their contact info, what they do, their past performance, their insurance, any accreditations they have. It's good practice to review their performance regularly, and some companies even outsource this whole function.
So it's about building a strong network of reliable partners.
Exactly. You want to know who you're working with and that they can deliver.
Okay, next up, procurement and pre-contract. What happens here?
This is where you define your work packages, identify potential vendors, send out enquiries, analyze the bids, negotiate terms, and finally draw up the subcontract documents.
So it's the whole process of selecting and appointing your subcontractors.
That's right. And you need to be very thorough and organized in this stage.
What about the inquiries? What do those typically look like?
You want to include all the essential information in your inquiries, like a covering letter with the project details, instructions to tenderers, the program, relevant sections of the main contract, specifications, drawings, a bill of quantities or a pricing schedule, and a statement that tenderers shouldn't alter the documents.
So you want to make sure everyone's bidding on the same thing.
Exactly. And using a standardized price return template is crucial. That way you're comparing apples to apples, and it's easier to analyze the bids and spot any discrepancies.
That makes sense. Okay, so you've selected your subcontractor, now you move into contract administration. This is about managing the contract on a day-to-day basis, right?
Yes, it's about making sure the contract is properly administered, that everyone's doing what they're supposed to, and that any issues are dealt with promptly.
And the RICS really emphasizes the importance of good record keeping in this stage.
Oh, absolutely. Record keeping is paramount. You need those records to support any potential claims or to defend against them. And if you're working on a cost-plus contract, good records are essential for substantiating the costs you've incurred.
Right, so you're protecting yourself.
Exactly. If you don't have the records, you can't prove anything.
What about correspondence? Any tips for managing that effectively?
Yeah, clear communication is vital. Have a good filing system, keep everyone's contact details up to date, use templates for common communications, make sure everything is clear and concise, issue notices promptly, stick to any contractual deadlines for responding, and consider whether the client needs to be informed about any significant developments.
So be organized, be prompt, be transparent.
Exactly. It'll save you a lot of headaches down the line.
The document also talks about liability to subcontractors and accruals. Can you explain those?
Sure. Liability to a subcontractor is the total amount you owe them for work completed, regardless of whether they've invoiced you or not. An accrual is an accounting adjustment that recognizes the difference between this liability and what you've actually paid them. It's about making sure your financial records accurately reflect the true cost of the project.
Okay, so it's about recognizing costs even if you haven't actually paid them yet.
Right. It gives you a more accurate picture of the project's financial position.
Okay, last stage of supply chain management, the final account. What happens here?
This is where you wrap things up with the subcontractor. You finalize the account, agree on the final value of the work, and make sure all the documentation is in order. It involves compiling all the records, agreeing on any variations, substantiating any cost reimbursable items, and the subcontractor also needs to provide things like operation manuals and as-built drawings.
So it's about bringing everything to a neat and tidy conclusion.
Exactly. You want to tie up any loose ends and make sure everyone is happy with the final figures.
Okay, supply chain management, check. Now let's talk about valuing work. Why is this so important?
Valuing work is about putting a monetary value on the work that's been completed. It's used to determine payments to contractors and subcontractors, and it helps you track the financial performance of the project.
So it's how you figure out who gets paid what and how you know if you're making or losing money?
Precisely. It's an essential part of the commercial management process.
How often is work typically valued on a project?
Usually monthly, but it can be more frequent depending on the contract, and it's important to do it cumulatively, meaning each valuation includes all the work done from the start of the project.
Okay, so you're always looking at the total picture.
Right. You want to see how the project is progressing overall.
What about variations? How are they valued?
Generally, variations are valued in the same way as the original work, but their status, whether they're agreed under negotiation or unagreed, can affect how they're treated in the valuation.
So you need to be clear on the status of each variation.
Absolutely. It can make a big difference to the overall valuation.
The RICS document mentions different methods for internal valuation. Can you give some examples?
Sure, you might measure the quantities completed against the estimate, assess the percentage complete for activities or elements, or assign values to milestones. The method you choose will depend on the project and how much detail you need.
So there are different ways to skin a cat, so to speak.
Exactly. Find what works best for you and your project.
And external valuation, the payments from the client to the contractor, does that differ depending on the type of contract?
It can. For lump sum or bill of quantities contracts, it's often similar to the internal methods. But for cost reimbursable contracts, it's based on the actual costs incurred. Target sum contracts often use a similar approach for interim payments, but the final payment is based on the target versus actual costs. And for GMP contracts, interim valuations are usually based on actual costs, but capped at the GMP.
So the contract really dictates how the work is valued and paid for.
That's right. The payment mechanism is a key part of the contract.
The RICS also talks about the importance of a rolling contract final account. What is that?
It's basically a live document that tracks all the changes and variations to the contract. It starts with the initial contract sum, and then you add or subtract the value of any agreed variations. It gives you an updated picture of the likely final cost of the project as it progresses.
So it's like a constantly evolving version of the original contract sum.
Exactly. It helps you stay on top of the financial implications of any changes that happen along the way.
Okay, valuing work, we got it. Now let's switch gears and talk about understanding cost. What should a good cost report tell you?
A cost report should tell you exactly how much money has been spent on the project so far, broken down by cost type, like labor, plant, materials, subcontractors, and any other expenses. And ideally, it should be aligned with those common analysis levels we talked about earlier, so you can compare cost to the budget and track your performance effectively.
So it's a detailed breakdown of where the money's going.
Precisely. You need to know where every penny is being spent.
How do you actually capture all this cost information?
Well, it comes from various sources. Labor costs are tracked through timesheets, plant costs through hire orders and timesheets, material costs through purchase orders and invoices, subcontractor costs through their payment applications, and so on. And it's crucial to match invoices to orders and use accruals to recognize costs that haven't been invoiced yet.
Right, so it's about having a system in place to capture all the different types of costs accurately.
Absolutely. And if you use a good project accounting software, it can make this process much easier, especially if it's set up to use those common analysis levels.
So technology can help here too.
Oh, definitely. It can automate a lot of the data entry and make reporting much more efficient.
The level of detail in the cost reports, does that depend on who's going to see them?
Yes, it does. Internal cost reports for the project team will be much more detailed than the reports you send to the client. The client usually only needs a high-level summary of the costs.
Okay, so you tailor the reports to the audience.
Exactly. You don't want to overwhelm the client with unnecessary detail.
Okay, so we know how to value the work and we know how to track the costs. Now, how do we put those two things together to see how the project is performing financially?
That's where cost and value analysis comes in, sometimes called CVR or CVC. It's essentially the project's profit and loss statement. You compare the value of the work completed to the costs incurred, and the difference tells you whether you're making or losing money.
So it's a snapshot of the project's financial health.
That's right. And it brings together all the other commercial management activities we've been talking about. The estimate, the valuation, the cost tracking, it all culminates in this analysis.
And by doing this analysis regularly, you can spot any potential problems early on, right?
Absolutely. You want to catch any cost overruns or schedule slippages before they become major issues.
Okay, so we're on top of the costs and the value. Now let's talk about cash flow. This is about managing the actual money coming in and going out, right?
That's it. You can have a profitable project on paper, but if you don't manage your cash flow properly, you can still run into trouble.
So it's not just about profit, it's about having enough cash on hand to pay your bills.
Exactly. You need to make sure you have enough cash coming in to cover your expenses, pay your subcontractors, and so on.
The RICS document highlights some key things to monitor for effective cash flow management.
Right. You need to understand the payment processes for the main contract, how valuations are done, the payment terms, any month-end fixed costs you have, any alternative payment cycles, any credit arrangements you have, and when you need to pay your direct and indirect costs. It's a lot to keep track of.
So it's about being very organized and proactive.
Absolutely. You need to be on top of your cash flow at all times.
Okay, last but not least, commercial decision-making. This is about making the right financial choices throughout the project, right?
It is. Every decision you make has commercial implications, and you need to be aware of those implications and make informed choices.
The RICS talks about using a risk and opportunity register to manage this process.
Yes, a risk and opportunity register is a great tool. It helps you identify potential risks and opportunities, assess their likelihood and impact, and develop strategies to mitigate the risks and capitalize on the opportunities.
So it's a proactive approach to managing the commercial aspects of the project.
Exactly. You don't want to just react to problems. You want to anticipate them and plan ahead.
What are some examples of commercial decisions you might make at different stages of the project?
Well, at the tender stage, you'll be thinking about things like security, bonds, warranties, funding, damages, joint ventures, insurance, cash flow. These are all big decisions that will shape your risk profile and can be reflected in your pricing or your margin adjustments.
So you're setting the stage for the entire project at the tender stage.
That's right. You're making decisions that will have a long-term impact.
And after you win the contract, what kind of kernel decisions are you making?
Well, you'll be developing your initial forecast, which includes the budget and the cash flow projections. And then throughout the project, you'll be tracking your performance against that forecast and making adjustments as needed.
So it's an ongoing process of monitoring and adapting.
Exactly. Things rarely go exactly to plan in construction, so you need to be flexible and responsive.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We've talked about estimates, value engineering, supply chain management, valuing work, understanding costs, cost and value analysis, cash flow, and commercial decision-making.
Yeah, we've pretty much hit all the key areas of commercial management in construction.
And the main takeaway, I think, is that all these things are interconnected, right?
Absolutely. They all feed into each other, and it's crucial to have a holistic view of the commercial side of the project.
Using common analysis levels is also key.
Yes, that's essential for comparing data and tracking performance effectively.
And managing risks and opportunities proactively is crucial.
You want to stay ahead of the curve, not constantly be playing catch up.
Right. So good commercial management, it's not just about making money. It's about delivering the project successfully.
Absolutely. It's about ensuring the project is completed on time, within budget, and to the required quality standards.
And ultimately, that's what keeps clients happy and businesses profitable.
Exactly. It's a win-win for everyone involved.
So for those of you listening, think about how you can implement these principles in your own projects. How can you improve your estimating process, your value engineering approach, your supply chain management?
What tools and systems can you use to track costs and value more effectively?
How can you be more proactive in managing risks and opportunities?
And here's a final thought for you. How would implementing a robust system of common analysis levels across all your projects transform your ability to identify potential issues, make better decisions, and maximize your profitability?
Food for thought. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into commercial management in construction. We'll see you next time.
See you then.